So Pathfinders, today we have the privilege to have with us Lieutenant General Rich Clark, who is joining us from the Pentagon. General Clark, just for a way of introductions, he's a highly experienced and decorated bomber pilot. He's commanded at multiple levels in the Air Force. He was actually the defense attaché in Cairo, Egypt. So some very unique experiences in the Air Force, and is currently at Headquarters Air Force in charge of the nuclear deterrence mission for the entire United States Air Force. So obviously, huge responsibility. Thank you, sir, for taking time. And incidentally, General Clark is no stranger to us here in the 501st because he was previously the 3rd Air Force Commander. So General Clark, thank you for taking the time to join us today, sir.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Kurt. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great linking up with you and the other Pathfinders. I certainly miss Europe, and definitely my trips to the UK to visit the 501st were great memories. So this is an awesome opportunity. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Hey, sir, so as we look at diversity and inclusion across our wing, and we're having conversations with our airmen, conversation that we had, a couple of our young Black airmen here in the 501st said, we look at the General Officer Corps of the Air Force and we don't see ourselves. And so I immediately thought of you. I wanted to reach out to someone who I look up to and respect, who spent a lot of time mentoring me, certainly, to try and get some perspectives. So thanks for joining us, sir. Thank you for helping us start a conversation. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that, Kurt, definitely. But yeah, go ahead.
All right, sir. So in the wake of the senseless death of George Floyd, the things that we see happening in America, I think the question on a lot of people's minds are, what are you thinking? What's going on in your mind, sir, as you watch these events unfold across the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, Kurt, I think I feel the same way that a lot of people feel. First, I mean, I'm mad. And when you see what happened with Mr. Floyd and how that all played out, it was really unfortunate, horrible incident. And then, he's not the only one, right? We just saw Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, another tragedy and senseless act, it appears to be. And those instances really do infuriate me, and I think a lot of other folks too. But it also makes me sad because it's not like these are new incidents. It's not like these types of things haven't been happening for years, for decades, even centuries. So it makes me sad that we're not making the kind of progress that we really need to make on these types of issues. But in a lot of ways, I'm encouraged because it seems to me that people are starting to handle this in a different way. Now it's not just the people who are affected who are outraged, but there's a lot of folks who are unaffected. There's a lot of people who aren't suffering from a racial bias, but they're still mad about what they saw because this is an American problem. This isn't a Black problem. It's not a white problem. This is an American problem. And I see a lot of people when you watch TV, when you hear people who are speaking out, it's a diverse group of people. It's people from all across America, really across the world, around the world, that are outraged by this. So I'm hopeful that the discussion that, like the discussion we're having today, but the discussion around the world will lead to real action and real policy change. So I'm encouraged, but I'm also mad and I'm also sad that we're still dealing with this.
Yeah, I totally agree, sir. And I think that's the thing that strikes me is, obviously I told our wing up front, no surprise, I'm a white male, so I don't understand this problem the same way that other Black airmen and other minorities do. And so, but I'm angry to see that these things are happening in America to people. So I appreciate that perspective. Sir, we all have different experiences growing up. We all have different upbringings. Can you share with us your story? What was your life story? And then how did you get from there to the Air Force Academy and to a, obviously very successful career in the Air Force?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kurt. First, I'll just say I've been blessed. I mean, I've been really fortunate in my life, but it's been very, I would say, non-standard. I originally, I grew up in the Bay Area in Oakland, California, from the age all the way up through the age of 10. And Oakland, Berkeley, California, very diverse areas. And I think that the perspective that I gained as a kid was an interesting one, but one that saw diversity as a positive thing and a normal thing. And that's how I started out. But then when I was about 10 years old, my family moved to Richmond, Virginia. And that was a completely different experience, culturally and from a racial standpoint. It was very segregated. This was in the mid 70s, early to mid 70s, very segregated. It's the first time that anyone ever used the N word to me. And I remember being shocked that someone would actually do it. And the first turned into the second and the third, and it was just commonplace. It's the first time that I ever had an incident with the police when I was pulled over later on in my teen years as a driver. And a group of friends, there was three of us in the car, we got pulled over for no reason. And we were actually on our way to go downtown because the driver forgot his driver's license. And they had us out of the car, they searched the car, they were going to take us downtown because he didn't have proof of his ownership of that car. Fortunately, one of the guys in the car, his dad was driving by, and I saw him and I screamed out, "Mr. Harris!" And his dad happened to work for the mayor, Mayor Henry Marsh at the time. And Mr. Harris pulled over and he talked to those cops. And I remember him going, "So, officer, tell me, why are you detaining these young men?" And the officer said, "Well, sir, one of them forgot he doesn't have his driver's license, and we had no proof of ownership of this car." And he said, "So how could you tell that from your car to their car? Are you telling me that you pulled him over because you suspected that he didn't have his driver's license?" And the cop was completely dumbfounded. He didn't know what to say. And I remember Mr. Harris walking by and looking at each of their badges and going, "Officer such and such, such and such, and such and such." I think that the police chief would love to hear that. They didn't know who they were messing with at the time. And I learned a lot of lessons there. First, that it was wrong. And there was a discriminatory practice going on. But second, that justice needs to be served in these situations. And Mr. Harris brought justice to that situation for us. We didn't end up going downtown. But it was an eye-opener for me. And these are in my teen years. And I will tell you that what I realized was that this is real. When people talk about racial injustice, it's real. And it's certainly not everybody, but there are people out there who have biases, who have, whether conscious or unconscious, there are biases out there. So growing up, I realized that was part of our society, hopeful that it would change. But I did want to continue to be a part of the solution. One of the opportunities I got was to go to the Air Force Academy. I got recruited to play football there. And joining the Air Force was really, honestly, coming from where I was coming from, was a breath of fresh air. I enjoyed the academy, made lots of friends from all races and all backgrounds. But I'll tell you, even there were biases. There were biases, unconscious or conscious. But I have hope, and I had hope there, and I have hope still that we can move ourselves forward. And it's not a fast process, but I think that we as airmen, we as people who are willing to serve our country, we should have a particularly special interest in making sure that everybody in our country is treated fairly and enjoy the freedoms that we fight for, that we have taken the oath to fight for. So So my background has brought me here. I've got to see a lot in my time, but I am very appreciative of the opportunities I have, and I want to see others have the same opportunity that I've had, regardless of what they look like, what their gender is, what their background is. We all deserve to have those barriers knocked down so that we can be everything that we can be. So yeah, I'm very hopeful and positive and grateful for what I've been given in my life.
Yeah, that's great, sir. Thanks. I appreciate you sharing that. And, you know, these are the things that, even though you and I have known each other for, a few years now, and, I've never heard that story about you. I've never heard about your upbringing. And partly I look at myself and go, well, because I never asked before. And it's not something that wear on your sleeve to define you. As far as I'm concerned, I see you just as a great military officer and leader, not as someone who had that in their past. So thanks for sharing that, sir. I appreciate that, and I know our airmen will too. So you talked about the Air Force and how going to the Air Force Academy was a breath of fresh air. We've been talking about that in the wing here too, about how the military has often led the way for America. The military was actually desegregated in 1948, and it took probably, it was really the next 10, 20 or more years that then helped spawn the civil rights movement. And so that's that's the message that we're sharing with our airmen. We probably can't change America tomorrow, but we sure as heck can make changes here in our wing and in our Air Force. How do we make this the moment we look back on in history and say, that's when we made positive change? That's how we changed our Air Force, and that led to change in America. Do you have ideas about how we do that? What should our first steps be toward making that change?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kurt. And, when you talk about our background as an Air Force, the first thing that I think about are the great Tuskegee Airmen, who really showed people that discriminatory practices were wrong. They went into World War II, and some people say they were the first black fighter pilots, but I like to refer to them as great fighter pilots who happen to be black, because the things that they achieved really showed the world that racial bias and discrimination is senseless, and that we're limiting ourselves as a country if we allow that to be a part of our culture and a part of who we are. So those barriers began to get knocked down with them, I think, and it led to a lot of great things with civil rights changes, Civil Rights Act in the late 60s. But we're still, like we talked about earlier, we still have issues and we still have a long ways to go. And I think the fact that we're talking right now is the kind of thing that needs to happen. The first thing that we need to do is listen. We need to listen to each other. We need to build understanding and not be offended by the things that we say, by the ideas that we have. Because if you can't get them out on the table, if we can't listen and understand and be empathetic towards each other, then it's going to be really hard for us to shape the problem and really have a common understanding of what this issue is. So listening is first. The second thing that we have to do is, when we do have an understanding of the problem, I think we have to own it. We have to own this problem together. And if we don't, if it's only the oppressed that want justice for themselves, we'll never get there. It has to be everyone wanting justice for everyone, regardless of what you look like or where you come from. We just need to stand for what's right and what's just in our country, and we have to own that. And then we need real action. We can't just talk about it. We can't just understand it, but we have to take action. And I believe the action starts with us understanding the root causes and changing policies to make the situation better. When you talk about Tuskegee Airmen, policies that desegregated the military, that led to desegregation in the rest of the country, those happened by policy changes. When you talk about the Civil Rights Act, that was Lyndon B. Johnson, spurred on by people like Martin Luther King, that changed our laws, that took us to another step. Now we need to continue with that. We need more policy changes that not only maintain the status quo, but actually are anti-discriminatory, that things that break down those barriers and build the equality in our country that we have to have. So we need to take action on it. So listen for understanding, listen to understand the problem, listen for potential solutions. Ownership of the problems that we have, ownership of where we might go with solutions, and then we have to take action. Those are sort of the steps that, just from my perspective, that would be really helpful for all of us.
Yeah, that's great, sir. I'm making notes of that for sure. Sir, you mentioned earlier that, when I said, hey, what are you thinking? How do you feel about this? You said, hey, I'm mad. I'm angry. I think, I see that in some of our airmen, particularly some of our young Black airmen. They're angry about what's happening. How can we as leaders, and I look at myself, how can I as a white male help? What can I do to help our airmen and understand the ones who say, rightfully so, hey, I'm angry about what's happening in America?
Yeah, that's another great question, Kurt. So I'll tell you another quick story. The story that I told you before about when I got pulled over, I was 17 years old or so. I have an 18-year-old son right now. He's about to go to college. He's on his way. In fact, he's going to be going to Harvard on a ROTC scholarship. So I'm really proud of him. But about 2 weeks ago, on a Saturday evening, it was late night, 12 o'clock, my daughter, she's 16, she ran downstairs and she's banging on the door of my wife, our bedroom. And she said, hey, Dad, Milo has left. Our son is named Milo. And Zoe was telling us, Milo has left the house. He went downtown DC to be a part of the protest. And this is at 12:15 at night, Kurt. My first thought was, okay, I'm going to destroy him for leaving the house. And he went on his bicycle. And this was the night, Kurt, that not only were there protests, but there was violent protests. There was looting. There was bad activity going on down there. And he left the house. And Zoe said, I begged him not to go, Dad. I told him not to go down there because they were upstairs watching the news and seeing what was going on. And this was her quote. She said, when I begged him not to go, Dad, he said, this is a part of my history. I have to go. Don't tell Dad or I'll never speak to you again. And of course, she never listens to him anyway. So immediately when he left the house, she ran down and told us. I called him on his phone and I told him to come back home now. He answered the phone. I said, come back home now, Milo. You know you're not supposed to be out and you definitely don't need to be down there where you're going. He said, okay, Dad, I'll be home. Well, he came home, but it was 3 hours later. He went downtown anyway. Usually he does what I tell him because he understands the threat to life and limb if he doesn't obey. But in this case, he decided to go anyway. And so we waited up for him. And about 3 hours later, almost 3 o'clock in the morning, he came into the house and he knew he was in trouble. He walked in the door and he said, Dad, I had to go. I'm sorry I disobeyed you, but I couldn't just watch it. Then he said, I have to tell you, though, I was disappointed because when I got down there, there was a lot of bad activity going on. There weren't people protesting. There weren't people voicing their opinions. There was just bad activity. And I was disappointed. It took him an hour to ride his bike there and an hour to ride his bike back. But he was disappointed. He said, I don't know what to think about it, Dad, but I'm mad. And I think that the people who were doing these things were mad too. And so our talk then turned into, all right, I appreciate what you did here. And you're lucky that you didn't get hurt down there while you were at the protest. And you're lucky you're not going to get hurt right now because your mom is sitting right next to me. But I will tell you that there are times to protest. There are times when it is okay and you have a right to voice your opinion and to voice your frustrations, but there's a right way to do that. And he said, Dad, will you go downtown with me when it's right? Will you go downtown and take me to a protest then. And then immediately his sister jumped on board and said, I want to go too. And so I told them that I would take them. And the next week, that was a Saturday night. On Wednesday, I checked the regs because I didn't want to do anything. I'm not a protesting type of person. I like to try to stay out of the politics. But in this case, I owed it to my kids to allow them that freedom that they have to voice their opinion, especially with the kind of anger that I saw in my son. And we did go down, and I will tell you, Kurt, it was a great experience. The first thing they said, though, when we got down there, Dad, there's a lot of white people here and Latino people here. This is a diverse group of people that were in this protest. That was the first thing that they recognized, even. And I think that brought a lot of hope to them. And it was it actually, I was kind of on the sidelines. I'm looking for, exit points and how are we going to get out if things go south. But then I really did see a very positive atmosphere of people talking about their feelings, expressing themselves, and really asking for change. They were asking for change, and it wasn't just Black people; it was American people that were protesting. And to me, that was very encouraging. It inspired my kids, I will tell you, and I think it brought them to another level because they had the opportunity to express themselves. I think for all of us, and back to your question, he's 18 years old, Milo. You have a lot of 18-year-old and 25-year-old and 30-year-old airmen who are also frustrated. And what you're doing right now and allowing them to talk about this issue, allowing them to share, and also your other airmen who are not African American, to allow them to express themselves too, and to give that opinion, their side of this opinion, because it might be the same, it might be different, but in the end, we got to have that shared understanding. And then also not only listening for what the problems are, but maybe we can hear from them about what the solutions are. And I think that the best way for all of us to deal with the sadness and the anger of this is first to express it, and then to really think about what the actions are that we need to take. What are some of those solutions? We got to own the problem. And I was thinking about it later, about if I had a sign, if I was down there and I actually was protesting, if I was doing that and I was going to take up a protest sign with me, I thought it should say something like, the struggle is real, express how you feel, and together we will heal. And that's what I think my protest sign would have said. Because I think it's about unity. It's about us coming together and solving this problem as a country, not as a specific race of people or a specific gender. It's about all of us together. So that's what we have to do. We got to come together and get through this and make ourselves better as a country as a result of it.
That's awesome, sir. I love that message. I'm gonna go back and make sure I make a note of that too. And I know you know this from being overseas. We're a little more challenged here because our status of forces agreement kind of sometimes constricts what our airmen can do. But our message to the wing has been, hey, I'm undaunted by the limitations. We can do this the right way. We can do positive events on base that are fully within what we're allowed to do as military members and military families, because we need to get after this problem. So I really appreciate your perspective, sir. Hey.
Yeah. Now you bring up a great point there too, Kurt. And I mentioned that I did go down there with my kids, and I think I also made a point. Protesting is not something that is usually in my MO. And I think we as military members have to really be careful to stay out of the politics of things. And in this case, I felt I needed to do it for my kids, really, to take them down. Really, it was on their behalf. But that just because we stay out of the politics doesn't mean that we can't deal with the issues and that we can't address the issues. So you're exactly right. We need to do this within the bounds of of our role as military members, but we still can have an impact, and we need to have an impact on the issue. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Hey, sir, we have taken up a lot of your time today, but let me just wrap up, if I could, sir, by saying, hey, on behalf of all of our Pathfinders across the United Kingdom and Norway, thank you for taking the time to be here to start a conversation with us, to give us some great perspectives, certainly some things for me to go back and think about now as we work toward a better future for our Air Force and for our country. So, sir, thank you very much.
Yeah, Kurt, I want to thank you first. I want to thank you for your leadership and your willingness to tackle this. Is not an easy issue. It is not easy to talk about, but the fact that you want to start the conversation means a lot to me. So thank you for that. And I want to thank your airmen first for what they and their families are doing to make our country better, to provide the security that we need. And really, I hope that they will take part in this dialogue that you're starting and make it a positive dialogue. Make it a dialogue of listening and understanding, and help that to lead to greater change and really to a better America. So thank you, Kurt. It was great seeing you again, brother, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks
Out
so
here.
much, sir.